You have heard it your whole life. Save for the rainy day. Your mother said it. Your grandmother said it. Maybe a teacher. Maybe an old neighbor. Maybe someone whose name you cannot even remember anymore. Save for the rainy day. And you nodded. Maybe you even meant it. But then the paycheck came. And the bills came with it. And after the bills, there was not much left. And what was left? Well, you worked hard for it. You deserved a little comfort, a little enjoyment, something for yourself after everything you give, every single week. So you spent it. And you told yourself, next month will be different. Next month I will save. Next month never came. Or maybe it did come, and something else came with it. An emergency, a medical bill, a car that broke down, a roof that started leaking, a job that suddenly disappeared. And you stood there, in the middle of that rainy day that everyone warned you about, with nothing in your hands. No umbrella, no shelter, no reserve, just the rain. I know that feeling. And today I want to tell you a story, not a lecture, not a financial lesson with charts and percentages, a story about a woman named Clara, who learned the hardest possible version of this lesson, so that maybe you do not have to. Clara was born in 1938 in a small mill town in South Carolina. The kind of town that existed because of one thing, the textile mill at its center, and would one day cease to exist for the same reason. But in 1938, the mill was everything. It employed fathers and mothers, sons and daughters. It set the rhythm of the town. When the mill whistle blew in the morning, the whole town moved. When it blew at the end of the shift, the whole town exhaled. Clara's family had worked in the mill for 2 generations, her grandfather, her father, and when Clara turned 17, Clara herself. She was not unhappy about it. In that town, in that era, the mill was not a last resort. It was simply life. Clara was a bright girl, quick with numbers, good with people. She had a laugh that made the women around her on the factory floor feel lighter on the hard days. She was also, from the very beginning, someone who noticed things. She noticed which families in her neighborhood seemed to weather difficulties more easily than others. She noticed which women at the mill looked worried at the end of every month, and which ones did not. She noticed that the women who did not look worried, who seemed to carry something solid and unshakable inside them, even when things got hard, had something in common. They were not necessarily the highest paid. They were not the ones with the fanciest houses or the newest clothes, but they had something put away, something saved. Clara noticed this, filed it away, and then, like most young people with good intentions and better distractions, she forgot about it. When Clara was 19, she met Thomas. He worked the night shift at the mill, tall, broad-shouldered, with a slow, easy smile, and hands that were always slightly stained with machine grease, no matter how hard he scrubbed them. They were married within a year. A simple wedding. Borrowed dress. Neighbor's backyard. Cake that Clara's mother baked herself. It was not grand, but it was theirs. They moved into a small rented house 2 streets from the mill. Thomas worked nights. Clara worked days. Between the 2 of them, they brought home enough. Not abundance, but enough. And that word, enough, became the quiet danger they lived inside without knowing it. Because enough felt fine. Enough felt like success, compared to what they had grown up with. So when there was a little extra at the end of the month, and sometimes there was, they spent it. A nicer cut of meat for Sunday dinner. New curtains for the front room. A birthday celebration that went a little longer and cost a little more than planned. Small things, innocent things, but constant. Always constant. Clara sometimes thought about saving. She would stand at the kitchen sink washing dishes and think, we should put something aside, just in case. But then Thomas would come home from his shift, tired and hungry, and she would think, not tonight, we will figure it out later. Later always came. The saving never did. The 1960s were good to Clara and Thomas. The mill expanded. Thomas got promoted to floor supervisor. His pay increased meaningfully. Clara moved into a quality control role that paid better and was less physically demanding. For the first time in their lives, they had real breathing room. And breathing room, for people who had never had it before, is a dangerous thing, because breathing room feels like arrival. It feels like, we made it, we can relax now. They moved into a bigger rented house. Thomas bought a new truck, his first new vehicle ever. He paid for it on installment. They took a vacation, the first of their lives, driving down to Florida for a week. They bought a television, then a better television. Their children, 2 daughters and a son, grew up wanting for very little. New school clothes every year, birthdays properly celebrated, Christmas with presents under a real tree. Clara felt proud. She had given her children more than she had been given. Was that not the whole point? Was that not what all the years of mill work were supposed to produce? An older woman at the mill, a woman named Dottie who had worked there for 30 years, tried to say something to Clara once, during a lunch break. "You all spending a lot these days, Clara," Dottie said without judgment. "Nothing wrong with enjoying it, just make sure you are keeping some too." Clara smiled politely. "Thomas has it handled," she said. Dottie looked at her for a moment, then went back to her sandwich. She did not push. Some lessons, Dottie knew, cannot be borrowed from someone else. They have to be lived. It started with Thomas's back. Years of physical work, first on the floor, then supervising but still on his feet for 10-hour shifts, had taken their toll quietly. In 1971, Thomas hurt his back badly enough that he missed 6 weeks of work. 6 weeks with no income from the main earner. Clara's salary covered the basics. Barely. But the truck payment still came. The bigger house rent still came. The children's needs still came. And there was nothing set aside to absorb any of it. For 6 weeks, Clara sat at that kitchen sink, every night after dinner, doing the arithmetic in her head. The numbers did not add up. They borrowed from Thomas's brother. A small amount. Enough to get through. Thomas went back to work. They paid the brother back. Life resumed. And here is the most dangerous thing that can happen after a close call. You survive it. You breathe out. And you tell yourself, we got through it. We are fine. We will be more careful. But careful is not the same as changed. Within 6 months, they were living exactly as they had before. The truck payment, the bigger house, the comfortable spending. Dottie watched from across the factory floor and said nothing. She already knew what was coming. She had seen it before. Many times. The mill announced its closure in 1979. Not suddenly. There had been rumors for 2 years. Cheaper production elsewhere. Imported textiles. A market that was shifting faster than a small South Carolina town could adapt to. But rumors are easy to dismiss when the whistle still blows every morning and the paycheck still comes every Friday. So Clara and Thomas dismissed them. Right up until the Tuesday morning when the plant manager called a meeting on the factory floor and made it official. 6 months' notice. Then the doors would close permanently. Clara stood in that factory floor meeting and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. She was 41 years old. Thomas was 44. They had worked in this mill for a combined total of nearly 50 years, and they had nothing saved. Not nothing in the dramatic sense. A small amount in a jar at home, a few $100s in a basic account, but nothing that could absorb what was coming. No mortgage because they had always rented, which meant no property to fall back on, no investments, no land, no secondary income, just the knowledge that in 6 months the whistle would stop blowing, and the paycheck would stop coming. Clara went home that night and sat in the kitchen long after Thomas fell asleep. She thought about Dottie, about that lunch break conversation years ago. Make sure you are keeping some too. She thought about all the Sunday dinners with nicer cuts of meat, about the Florida vacation, about the television they had upgraded twice, about 6 weeks of Thomas's injury and the panic of those weeks, and how she had survived it and immediately gone back to exactly what she had been doing before. She sat there in her kitchen in the dark, and for the first time in her adult life, Clara felt completely and utterly unprepared for the rain. I want you to sit with that image for just a moment. A woman who worked hard her entire adult life, who raised good children, who built a decent, comfortable life through honest labor, sitting alone in her kitchen at night, afraid, not because she was lazy, not because she was irresponsible, but because nobody ever sat down with her and told her, clearly, specifically, seriously, this is how you prepare for the day the rain comes. That is what Ember and Echo is here for. Subscribe right now if you have not already, because the next story we tell might be the one that changes everything for you. Now, let us get back to Clara, because her story is not over, not even close. The mill closed on a Friday in March 1980. Clara stood at the gate with the other workers as the last shift ended. Some people cried, some stood in silence. Some had already found other work and were trying not to show their relief out of respect for those who had not. Clara and Thomas drove home without speaking. That weekend, Thomas sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and a pencil and wrote down everything. What they owed, what they had, what they needed each month to survive. It was the first time in their marriage, after more than 20 years, that they had ever done this together. What they saw on that notepad was sobering. They had enough saved for approximately 3 months of basic expenses. After that, nothing. Thomas found work within 2 months at a hardware distribution warehouse on the edge of the county. Less pay, harder physical conditions, no seniority. He took it without complaint. Clara found part-time work at a grocery store and later added a few hours at a school cafeteria. Their combined income was significantly less than what they had been earning at the mill. But something had changed, something fundamental and permanent. For the first time in their lives, Clara and Thomas kept a budget. Every dollar that came in was assigned a purpose before it arrived, and for the first time in their lives, one of those purposes was saving. Not a large amount, not at first, but something. Every single week, without exception, Clara started with whatever was left after the necessities. Some weeks it was very little, but it went in the jar, and then into a simple savings account. And it stayed there, no matter what. She treated it like a bill, non-negotiable, due every week, cannot be skipped. It was a small shift in thinking, but it changed everything. The decade that followed was not easy, but it was different from every decade before it, because this time they were building something, slowly, carefully, with the kind of intentionality that only comes from having learned the hard way what happens when you do not. Thomas's warehouse job led to a supervisor position after 3 years. Clara's grocery store hours expanded, and she eventually moved into a bookkeeping role, her natural gift with numbers finally finding a proper home. Their children were grown and independent. The expenses of raising a family were behind them, and every dollar that would previously have gone to comfort and enjoyment now went somewhere else first. By 1988, they had paid off Thomas's truck outright. By 1990, they had saved enough for a down payment on a small house, a modest house, nothing grand, but theirs. For the first time in their lives, after decades of renting, they owned the ground beneath their feet. Clara stood in that empty house the day they got the keys. She walked slowly through each room. She thought about the mill, about Dottie, about the kitchen where she had sat alone in the dark the night the closure was announced. She thought about all the years of spending comfortably and saving nothing. And she thought about the decade of discipline that had brought her here, to this house, to this ground, to this feeling of something solid beneath her feet that could not be taken away. She sat down on the floor of the empty living room, and for the first time since that dark kitchen night in 1979, Clara cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from gratitude, from the deep and quiet satisfaction of a person who had finally learned the lesson. Clara's story is not unusual. That is the hardest thing about it. Millions of people live exactly as Clara and Thomas lived, working honestly, providing for their families, enjoying the fruits of their labor week by week, and leaving themselves completely exposed to the one thing that is absolutely guaranteed to happen to every single person alive. The rainy day comes. It always comes. Not always the same shape. Not always the same size. Sometimes it is a job lost. Sometimes a health crisis. Sometimes an accident. Sometimes an economic shift that nobody predicted and nobody can stop. But it comes. And the only question that actually matters, is whether you are standing under shelter when it arrives, or standing in the open with nothing above your head. Clara's lesson was expensive. Decades of vulnerability, years of fear, a crisis at 41 that could have been prevented by a habit she could have started at 21. But here is what I want you to take from her story. It is never too late to start. Clara was 41 when the rain came. She was 52 when she stood in her own house for the first time. She started late. She built slowly. She got there. And here is what I want you to understand about the saving itself. It does not have to be large. It does not have to be dramatic. It just has to be consistent, a small amount, every week, without exception, treated not as optional but as mandatory, as non-negotiable as rent, as certain as a bill, because that is what it is. You are paying your future self. You are building the shelter before the rain starts. And the earlier you start, the stronger that shelter gets. Clara started at 41. Imagine what she could have built if she had started at 21. I think about Clara often. I think about her sitting at that kitchen sink night after night, telling herself, "Not tonight, we will figure it out later." I think about Dottie at the lunch table saying, "Make sure you are keeping some too." I think about the night in the dark kitchen when the rain finally came and Clara had no shelter to run to. And I think about the woman she became after that night, disciplined, intentional, unafraid. The woman who stood in her own house at 52 and cried with relief on an empty floor. She paid a high price for that lesson. You do not have to. The rainy day is coming. I do not know when. I do not know what shape it will take for you, but I know it is coming, because it always comes. So start today, not tomorrow, not next month, not when things are more settled or more certain or more comfortable. Today, whatever you can set aside, set it aside, and do not touch it. Build your shelter while the sky is still clear, so that when the rain comes, and it will come, you are already standing under cover, dry, safe,